What exactly is machine learning?
Good morning, Mr. Miller. So you want to get to know me better?
Okay.
Well, let's ask Mike and Rhonda first.
Machine learning achieves results like you've never gotten.
These algorithms can prioritize to get better results in the system. It just...
Thanks, guys, but let me take it from here. Let's take Andy, for example. A few months ago, his company took off when he invented...
The wireless hairdryer.
Oh, watch out, your coffee.
We couldn't cope. HR, finance, marketing, it was just too much. Customer service was a major fail.
Your phone.
Customer service, Neue speaking. How can I help?
Can you use the wireless hairdryer underwater?
I could help you with this.
I don't know, man. If you ask me, AI is like after our jobs.
Don't worry. I'd say AI doesn't take your job. It just takes out the boring parts and lets you focus on the good stuff. Are you still following?
What's this?
Easy. That's a dog.
And this?
That's an elephant.
Fine, but you don't know what that is, though.
Maybe a mix of a lion and a tiger?
That's a liger.
Thanks. Next time I'll get it for sure. To sum it up, it's the art of making computers do useful things.
It's cordless.
Without having to tell them to.
Okay, so you can recognize and interpret images and text.
Yeah.
You can understand what I'm saying and reply.
Yes?
And I can apply it directly to my existing tools.
Yep.
And put all this together, you can make decisions.
That's right.
Who are you again?
Okay, thank you for that, and thanks, Kalle, for the introduction. I would like to spend the next roughly 20 minutes to talk a bit about how these intelligent technologies actually can make businesses intelligent, and how does that at the end impact us. And for that, I have two very interesting guests. Here on my right side, I have Upen Barve. Upen is a colleague of mine from SAP. He works on the New Ventures and Technologies group based in Potsdam, and he is a fusionist. So he's a fusionist not only at home, in his kitchen, but also at work in his job. So he actually brings together these different technologies with customers, with partners, with startups, in order to actually solve business problems. Also have here on my left side, Stefan Heumann. And Stefan is actually part of the board of SNV. SNV is a local, a Berlin lead think tank that focuses particularly on the intersection between society and technology. So I like to say that Stefan actually brings voice to all of us in actually building the society of the future through digital transformation. And I want to start a bit from that point on digital transformation. So we've seen a lot this morning and also some of these intelligent technologies and how very often they are used in disruption, in moonshot thinking and so forth. I actually think that beyond that, digital transformation is happening at scale when companies start using them on mundane tasks that they use on a day-to-day basis that affects all of us. And based on the experience that you have with customers, and you have worked with quite a lot of different customers, what do you see out there?
Well, I think I think we're definitely scratching the surface right now. You know, there was a big hype, AI, etc., and then businesses began to understand a little bit. Let's focus on a few bits of it. Let's say there's a significant layer which is called machine learning. Parts of what was described here. Let's take a look, right? What does a business care about? Largely, you know, you can sum it up in 4 things. You care about your customers, you care about your employees, you care about your product or products and family of products, and you care about brand. What does that mean? Now you get into measurements, right? Success measurements in each category. Every business wants to have increased revenue. That's why we all exist. Number 2, you want to have reduced risk. Number 3, you want to, you know, give people a little bit better time at work, quality time at work, right? And number 4, you want to also allow reimagination of some of these processes that you've built 20 years ago with the conditions then, and hence enable innovation. And today, I see examples of businesses, largely supported by us, a little bit of ad there, you know, exactly taking care of these success measurements, really applying it to the bottom, making sure your employees' journey into the company from point A to actually being an alumni. I hate the word retire. Being an alumni, how do you, you know, make use of intelligent technologies to deliver that to an employee, right?
And would you have maybe not a crazy, but kind of an interesting example that you could share?
Actually, there are very crazy fails as well. But yeah, one interesting stuff I'll tell you. So I have this colleague, and she just came back, bringing from a store, with a brand that makes this beautiful crystals, luxury jewelry stuff. Okay, a nice young lady coming back and keeps that on the table, goes to our makerspace, takes a hammer and starts breaking it. I say, hang on, what's wrong? Did you have a bad day? It's like, no, I'm just preparing for a customer meeting where we're going to prove that we can change customer service by using AI, the image recognition, pattern recognition, applying it back to the inventory so that they can keep up to the number of inquiries coming in. And this was a very successful, from POC to actually something that you could use from a jewelry brand store, which you would never imagine, to improve their customer service. About 100 items coming in and helping those. And funny part, just to conclude, the same thing inspired another customer in other corner of the world where they used the similar concept to actually report back broken pipes and get them fixed. So yeah, it's
proper
crazy, right?
There. I guess this is not exclusive to a private sector. I guess also in the public sector, a lot of this happens. Not sure about so much violence, but in terms of actually taking advantage of these technologies.
Yeah, there's a lot happening on the government side too, and coming off from Trent's great talk, who's, in my opinion, a real visionary in thinking about this technology. And we're talking about potentially a new operating system for our society and for our politics. The government is really still looking at this technology through its old operating system. It's about, it's two forces that are really driving the conversation in government and politics around AI and also partly around blockchain. That is that they see international competition, right? That they see a lot of, in Europe, from a European perspective, we see a lot of AI applications coming out of the US. We see China being very aggressive in the space. And so there's this worry for governments in Europe and in Germany that we are not keeping up with this key technology. So there's a lot of investments that are currently mobilized in the space, and the governments are thinking about how do we position our industry, our workforces, our education systems in this space. And the other part of how governments think about this, and this is also still very at the core of the classical government operating system, is what kind of rules and regulations do we need around that technology? So on the European level for the EU, it's very much this conversation of trustworthy AI. How can people trust this technology, and do we need some sort of verifications around it that we know that it's functioning right? How do we make sure of that? Because I think as AI is moving from being deployed on social networks or on Google search, or recommend you products into our core infrastructures, into health, into mobility, autonomous driving, the approach of move fast and break things is probably not the right one, right? We don't want to find out that the autonomous car is not working right when it's out on the road. So there's questions on what kind of regulatory environment we need to make sure that these technologies are safe when we put them on the roads, when we put the new machine learning diagnostic tools into the hospitals, that they really predict the right things. So those are the kinds of questions that governments are exploring at the moment.
So, but you did mention then a few examples there where, in fact, things are being used on things that we use on a daily basis, right? This actually means, in a way, that we become much more exposed to the production of data as well, and we become much more, I would say, on the private sector, maybe more of a product to all the brands that we actually consume. Do you see a shift on that, for example, on the corporate sector, in terms of actually trying to use more and more what they obtain from their customers as a product, rather than just trying to profile customers and target them as a marketing target?
Oh, that's interesting. So you're actually saying customer as a product. I haven't thought about that. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Yes, so look, there is more and more willingness to share a bit more. And that typically happens when you know what you get in return for that, right? Take a simple example. You would definitely say you'd be able to give me your data for 3 months starting 31st March if I give you 1, 2, 3 things in return. And I have an ability to take back my rights, right? That would lead us, these kind of measures would lead us a little bit faster into this participative co-creation kind of mode where you can then test different, test the models because, you know, more data is the basics for machine learning apart from compute power. So yes, we do see more and more willingness. There is a hurdle there with regulations and so on. And when you come back from Silicon Valley or Singapore or China, you always realize that, oh my God, yes, in Germany, you have to worry about TÜV before worrying about building a car or even having a concept out there. So, you know, at the moment, it's a little bit of this division. We see part of the world where participation is increasing because they see, given that data, given the volume, that I see a personal benefit or a business benefit. And in some cases, there's a lot of discussion and heavy, heavy reluctance because we don't know what else can be done with it.
Okay. But both of you already mentioned the topic of regulation, right? So I feel that's something that we need to address. And I know that in the past, I think probably 1 year ago, you wrote something about the investments around artificial intelligence, particularly about the fact that obviously China, both from the government and the private sector, and also the US mainly from the private sector, that you saw that obviously that will create a lag, and you also mentioned today as well that you saw that Europe was kind of trailing behind a bit on that. On the regulation side, though, Europe is actually leading, right? So and businesses that do business with any European citizens, in fact, they do need to have some practices in place. Do you really see this as a disadvantage for European-based companies, or do you actually see that this can actually have a big advantage for them as well?
I think as we move from applying this technology in core infrastructure, in mobility, in the health sector, in manufacturing, it's actually good that we have some requirements around regulations and making sure that the technology functions on a high level. So I actually think that the institutions we have there and that we have something like a TÜV and standard setting bodies is actually helpful. I think in the world of the consumer internet, you know, where it wasn't, you know, there wasn't that much harm if I give you the wrong predictions or the search results I show you are not the right ones and I just move somewhere else and it's not that much harm from that. I think there was a big disadvantage for Europe. I think in the more classical industry to demonstrate that your product has a high level of quality, I think is an advantage, and we have a lot of institutions that help you to get to the right thinking there. What I'm personally missing is more conversations from government with people like Trent, because I think he has a lot to say about the kind of model that I see also for Europe, a different model, but a different way of thinking around technology, you know, a decentralized system on how we share data and preserve privacy, and the way he thinks about the combination of blockchain and AI is really interesting. And for Berlin particularly, is such an interesting opportunity as we have such a strong blockchain community that Trent is part of here, and that unfortunately I think is not engaged enough with the government sector. I mean, the government sector has now written, the German government, a blockchain strategy, but it's still very much in the mold of this old operating system. It's not really about challenging some core assumptions, how things could work. And so I think building bridges, that's very much part of my work between these communities, the tech community and the visionaries there, and the people in government is really essential, because there's still a huge gap in the way the conversations go and also in the way the thinking is going.
Mm-hmm. And how can we actually, as a community, bring that to the government then? Because obviously we do have in here, I guess, a lot of big brains, and we also have corporations behind this. What can we actually do to close that gap?
I think that spaces like this, I've made the experience that it's very hard to have these conversations when you go to the government, because if you enter the building, there's the operating code is really ingrained into the structure of, you know, the offices are set up in Germany. It's even so crazy is that the status you have, the number of square meters you get for your office is defined by your level in the hierarchy. So if you have a certain level of hierarchy, you have the right to have certain square meters in your own office. I mean, this is this is the way, these formalistic hierarchical structures, when you are in these government buildings, very difficult to take them out of that kind of thinking. I've made the experiences when you take them out into new settings, into a think tank, into an interdisciplinary conference, they're opening up more, and we need to pull the government officials out of their government buildings more and having these kinds of conversations. That's my personal experience.
You can have a call out for everyone as well to help us on that then.
Yeah, bring them here. No, a brilliant point. Yeah, but there are a couple of basics, I think, which we lack here as well. We need to understand, to get to intelligence, right? To get to, let's say, intelligent business, eventually intelligent future, etc. There's a major step which, if you don't do right, that step is called digitalization. If your businesses, your governments cannot execute on the digital strategies right, we're going to get further delayed from the intelligence that you can benefit from. And this is a significant issue. Whether it is citizen services, whether it is going and registering your apartment, I don't know. Digitalization can help so much to speed up and really to close that. There's a gap, right? And it's a bottleneck. I think digital can ease out that bottleneck, and then eventually, because I remember, we will not have then those kind of situations where I guess Macron, it was the same day, was announcing the AI strategy. And in Germany, we had this survey up, hey, you can report here if you don't get mobile signals. It was the same day, right? And that's the tough part. So I'm saying if you get digital right, you're going to get faster towards getting benefits from the intelligence. Now, whether it's embedded intelligence into the software and services you use, or there's something specific you want to build, that's a different story. But you cannot get to it without investing properly in digitalization.
And you see the same, you share the same concern about investment, because do we lag behind in Europe? So your customers, you have customers globally, I guess. Do you have more customers elsewhere, or do you have a focus here, or?
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting one. There is this, always this debate, when you go to Japan, Japan loves to see what Germany is doing because, it's similar culture. China is busy bashing Europe and everyone else because they suddenly have, really leapfrogged themselves into this. So there's this current comparison, which is, Germany versus, or actually Europe. The comparison says it's Europe, China, and US. But it's not easy to, kind of comment on those comparisons. I think we need to break it down. There are certain parameters, right, when you compare. It's about talent, research, development, your investments into, hardware, and so on and so forth. Adoption is another key. So I think there are several parameters in which you will see that the picture is very different. When it comes to actual research, I think Europe is leading the way, not US, not China. But when it comes to adoption and applied, part of this research, currently, China is leading. But if you look at US is great in, acquiring talent, even European talent for that matter, allowing them to express and execute. And at the same time, if you look at the benefit they have, the top hardware companies, which is of essence, to get this whole machine learning and AI forward, actually belong there, which neither Europe nor China have at the moment. So it's an interesting balance, but as we know, adoption, availability of data, that's going to be key to progress forward. So when we compare, let's consider these different layers, and there would be many, and I'm happy to understand more of those layers as well. What do you think?
Yes, it's definitely very helpful to break down AI into different components. And I think that's why everybody is focused so on talent, because that's really where the competition is. Everybody who wants to do something in this space needs talent, because the software, the machine learning models, most of that is open source. It's widely available. But if you're not able to apply it very well, it doesn't help you that you can just download the software. You need really specialists who are able to use it. And so in that space, actually, Europe is very well positioned with its very good and broad education system. And if you go to California, if you go to Silicon Valley companies and see who are the main forces there in applying this technology and developing machine learning, you come across a lot of Europeans. Think about for Amazon, it's a German. For Facebook, who's heading the AI research, is a French. for Google, there's a Canadian. So it's very international, but a lot of that is coming. A lot of that is coming from Europe, and we are not using that talent. I think smart enough, because I think the opportunity for Europe lies is bringing that technology together with the core industries where Europe is still really strong in the mobility sector, in the health sector, in the manufacturing sector. And in that space, I mean, I think we need to be much more aggressive in terms of thinking about new applications and innovations. And that's really the opportunity in that space. And I also think in terms of how we mobilize data, I'm actually happy that we want to try to do a different way in Europe. And then we got to be honest about it. It's going to make things harder. And that's why it's so important to talk to innovators like Trent, who are thinking about what are the technical implications of building a more privacy-friendly data ecosystem that we can use to drive AI applications. I mean, we mostly have this discussion on the regulatory level with the European Data Protection Regulation. Mm-hmm. I think we need to have much more discussion on the technical level, how we do it. And I'm still missing kind of the 10 billion European Research and Development Fund to bring AI and privacy together. You know, if we're really saying like we want to do a different way in Europe, a third way that's different from the Chinese way, that's a little bit different from the Silicon Valley approach, then we cannot just talk about it. We need to put, the money where your mouth is. And I think the opportunity, what I would be pushing for is large-scale challenges in investments and thinking about, for example, the intersection of privacy and AI.
Okay. So I will not ask anyone to put your money where your mouth is, but I will ask you to put your mouth where the mic is. So if you want to have some questions to the panel, then I guess now will be the time for it. So, Kyla, you can bring it as well.
Okay, so from Slido, we've got 2 questions that relate to the comment about using AI to do the boring parts of work. One of them is asking how boring parts can also be essential, and when does the use of AI become over-reliance? So we're using the AI to do the boring parts. When do we start to over-rely on it so that we stop learning from those boring parts? And the second question is related. Boring, the definition of boring is a social construct that changes over time. How does AI distinguish boring from useful?
Thank you. If you don't mind, I give the first shot. I love the question, okay? Because I'm of a fundamental belief that, AI or whatever we call it boring because it's human nature. I believe that these things will help us finally be human at last. I mean, look, all of you're great in writing poems, perhaps, right? We too. But there are so many times we're bloody busy adjusting the margins on the paper. Let's get rid of that. Let's do the thing that we as humans are supposed to do, and hence use AI to get this stuff done. Now, there is a next level to this as well, which is called augmentation. And why is this all difficult? Because in the first time in humanity, we will have something that's non-physical that's going to augment us, okay? And that's why we need to be careful. And that's how, it can help us, because look at it. I mean, and somebody's, we are in the exponential conversation here. One thing that we all will not forget is human brains are not going to evolve as fast as we want. So how can we use those systems to augment ourselves, to be better as at given point, given context, right? That's the beauty part of it. And eventually, let's start behaving as, use this to behave as humans, right? Mm-hmm. Poetry, artistry, also in context of your business, right? That's what I think. So it's not over-reliance, to just close your comment. It's really making sure that you have invested in these right tools to, take a step forward.
But I guess there's also a point of trust there, right? So where do we actually put the line between fully trusting an algorithm and what for, right? So what type of decisions can you make? And can we have an algorithm working as a judge, for example? We could, and we have done things similar. We could actually get algorithms to do what lawyers do. But would we want them to do that? And I guess probably, I'm not sure, even if on the regulatory side of things, maybe we actually have a lot of thoughts around that as well, right? Are we actually going to stop early enough to prevent overusage, or are we actually, because of that, restringing ourselves to being even more competitive. So what's your view there?
So going back to the question of who defines what's boring, and I think it's actually a very political question, because a lot of people do for their livelihood jobs that are pretty boring. And I think this is why there's a lot of fear around the AI technology too. If we look at, I think, for example, if I look at the government sector, the bureaucracies that we make so much fun of because they're inefficient, and in Germany it's also paper-based work, and you need a lot of people to process our paper applications for government services. We could really automate this and take away a lot of boring tasks, but the people who are doing those tasks are very scared about this, and so there's a lot of one problem why we don't make much advances in applying these technologies usefully, because we get a lot of pushback from the people doing those boring jobs who are worried to be out of a job. So what I'm missing here is political leadership to say we're going to use this technology, but at the same time I'm giving a job guarantee to everyone, and I'm going to use you more productively to really solve the issues we need human beings to solve for, because we also need to be honest, there's a lot of things that AI still can't do. And we have a lot of problems here in Berlin where we could use manpower for and woman power for to solve. And if we had more of a conversation where we positively talk about a vision that we want to deploy the technology to do boring stuff, but at the same time empower people to do interesting stuff, then I think we would be moving forward in a much more productive way. And I'm often missing that in the conversation. And I think that's why you mentioned the employees as a very important stakeholder in the company, or whether that's in government. That's why there's so much pushback also, because there's some serious concerns around those people who are doing the boring work at the moment.
Perfect. That's a great closing thought. A round of applause to our guests today. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And